I knew this guy once who somebody pulled a knife on him when he was coming out of a nightclub and said, "Give me your wallet." And the interesting thing was he was with a group of people and this guy pulled the knife and said, "Give me your wallet." Now, this guy was absolutely high as a kite on MDMA, the guy who was threatened with the knife. But that wasn't the issue. He didn't see the knife, didn't see it.
Mhm.
So he misread the situation because he was a bit addled on the MDMA. He was a bit confused. And he just said to the guy, "Why on earth would I want to give you my wallet for?" Which the guy just sort of like his knife almost wilted, at that point. He had a ground of being because of a mistake, but his ground of being was such that it diffused the situation. This is the be, do, have principle. His being created a different doing, which created different results.
Okay, so you have just been watching a clip from the latest episode of Conversations with Tripp and Crowe. Now, if you don't know about this, this is a joint project with my creative partner on this, Alex Crowe. We are going deep in conversation about the stuff that matters to you if you are interested in personal mastery, becoming more adept at shaping your life as you would choose it to be. Now, you're going to find a link, by the way, in the description below, and I would encourage you to subscribe to the YouTube channel, even if you intend to listen mostly on Apple and Spotify. There's a load of really good shorts that Alex has been putting up on the YouTube channel, so go through, check that out, subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you on board for this. The next thing you're going to see, the next clip you're going to see from episode 2 is about a moment of transformation for me. Some people will know that I got into self-development largely driven by what I would call now crippling social anxiety, okay, for sake of convenience, convenient label. Now that was stopping me, that was holding me back from creating the life that I wanted to create. It was something that needed transforming, something that needed addressing. So I got busy doing that and I was effective in doing that. And that is what got me into the kind of mind tech that I am still very much into and still very much exploring and a student of. I'm not saying that this moment that I share in this video was the moment, the be all and end all, but it was hugely significant. So check it out. And if you're liking the flavor of the content, and if you are a person that is looking to up your own mental mastery, personal mastery, ability to create as you wish to create in your life, then subscribe to the podcast, check it out. We would love to have you on board.
Speaking for myself, you talked about charisma and all this kind of thing. I once believed that my issue was a real problem of not having the right social skills or something like that. And so I did a lot of research into developing the right social skills. When I first got into NLP, I thought that it would solve my problem because if I was able to understand other people's psychology and influence them and all of that, well, obviously then people are going to think I'm a great guy and all of that because I can influence their psychology. And I can influence their perceptions. So I can influence them to see me as however I felt that I needed to be seen by them. Right? But ultimately, that's an outside-in solution. It's like I believe my beliefs are right, so I have to micromanage the situation so as to bring about certain outcomes. So it doesn't matter what I was doing, it was still coming from insecurity.
Right, because you're trying to develop a skill or capability internally, but it's a skill internally to be able to affect something outside of you,
Right.
so that you can get what you want.
The skills I was working on initially, because when I got into NLP, modeling was the major thing that I was into. And the people I was modeling were people who I believed to be charismatic, influential individuals. So I was modeling their surface behaviors of charisma and influence and all of that. But I wasn't necessarily going for their kind of inner ground of being. And I wasn't questioning my own beliefs about what was and wasn't true, about charisma, about,
Was any of that seeping in? So by you acting in a more charismatic way or in a way that you saw these individuals?
I had some experiences that ended up leading to some inner mind shifts. One of which was, for a while, I thought that I might be a professional magician and mentalist. I'd been an amateur magician and mentalist for a while, and I started to take some professional gigs. So I had a mentor of mine, a guy called Lee Smith, who set me up with some professional gigs, quite a few. But the first one he ever set me up with, it was for what was called the Hermitage Ballroom at the time in Hitchin in Hertfordshire. And this is probably like in the 2000s, early 2000s maybe. And they had, there used to be a TV show called Skins on, and it was like a big thing in the 2000s. Don't know if you remember that.
So I wouldn't know. I was in the UK at the time, but I think I've heard about Skins.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's just like teenagers screwing each other and stuff like that. So like, it's quite an edgy show at the time. They had a Skins themed foam party at this Hermitage Ballroom. And I had to get it ready. So it's going to be a long queue. And I was hired basically to entertain the people in the queue, close up magic.
Was this before you became confident and had your grounds of being, or?
Well, hang on a second. Confidence is a myth. Remember that. But yeah, this is before. This is when I was doing a lot of outside-in modeling of charisma, patterns of.
So you hadn't resolved any. You weren't in the flow. You weren't present in the moment.
I was still terrified on the inside.
Right. That sounds terrifying.
Yeah, and I was a pretty good actor, and I'd done a lot of modeling of surface behaviors of charismatic people and good communicators and all of this kind of stuff. And I had skills, legitimate communication skills. And I had a good knowledge of psychology, and I was still absolutely terrified. So I turned up at this gig, and I checked in with Lee ahead of time because he's my mentor. And I said, look, Lee, how do I do this? How do I open the dynamic? And he said, really simple. He said, you just walk up, you put your hand out, you shake hands, you say, hi, my name's James. I've been paid to entertain you here this evening. So do you want to see some magic? It's just simple, right?
So my take on that is like, that's good and bad at the same time. The nice thing is to say, I was paid for this, because then all of a sudden that feels like kind of puts the responsibility. It's like, oh, it's not weird that I'm coming to talk to you.
Yeah.
So that's okay. But then I feel like if you're saying I was paid to entertain you, then it's like, well, shit, like I need to entertain you now. I can't mess this up. I can't be like half entertaining.
Right. So it's going to create different things for different people. I'm not saying that was a perfect opener, but I've just like asked my mentor for his advice, and that's what he's told me. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to run with that because I've got to do it. It's like do or die. There's no like, oh, let me think about this for a little bit longer and get my perfect opening line and all of that kind of thing. Because the gig was on the date that it was on, right? That's quite short notice. I remember I showed up and I parked my car in the car park, and I was sat in the car, and literally every fiber of my being was screaming, get out, go home, start the car back up, go home. Right, so every fiber of my being, I wanted to be sick. I just was like, ugh. Now, I know enough at the time about psychology and this kind of thing that I can't let that be communicated. At the time, I was thinking there's a way I want to come across. I know I need to come across as professional, as in control, all of this kind of thing.
Yeah. You'd be screwed if any of that came out, because like that happens. They're going to interact and react to you in a certain way, and that's going to make it worse. You're going to be worse. And then the second one is going to be worse. And then the third one's going to be worse.
Right. So, I'm walking on fire at this moment. It feels dangerous to me. Now, at this time, I had some deep beliefs about people, the world, myself. They were deep. I didn't even know I held them, because this is the thing about our deepest beliefs, the things we really believe are true. They're invisible to us. We do not see what we are seeing the world through. Right? Now, I carried the beliefs at the time. Some of the beliefs I carried were that people are generally unfriendly, that they are going to be mistrusting, that people will start from a place of mistrust, and you have to earn their trust, this kind of thing. All of these would have been in my unconscious belief system. And all of that would have been partly what I was accessing to create my terror in that moment. Anyway, I forced myself to get out the car, to go into the club, to go up to the manager who booked me, introduce myself. And at this point, I've told other stories elsewhere of like some of the first experiences I had of doing a lot of like self-recreation and self-transformation stuff. I'd done a reasonable amount at this point. So I'd built an external persona, a way of being that enabled me to carry myself professionally in spite of my fear. Right? I didn't build one. So I went up to the manager, introduced myself and said, okay, where do you want me to get started? He said, yeah, I'll have the queue outside if you wouldn't mind going up there and working the queue.
Do you want me to get started? Can you say no, please?
Yeah. So of course, I'm acting like I want to convey to him that I'm a professional, that I've done this 1,000 times. But really what I didn't understand at the time is it would have been stronger created from the inside out. Now, I was good. I was a good actor. I was actually good at putting a veneer over my fear, right? I'm not saying I did it perfectly. I'm just better than a lot of people. And I could do it well enough. Anyway, I went out. I'm sort of like going, right, just do it, just do it, just do it. So I walked up to the first people I walked up to, fully in actor mode. And I walked up and I went, hey, stuck my hand out to shake hands. And I've got my mental script that I'm about to follow, which is, hey, my name is James and I'm a magician and I've been paid to entertain you here this evening. So I'm curious, would you like to see some magic, whatever it was going to be? So I had my script in my mind.
There's no way it came out that smoothly. It must have been like a regurgitation.
Well, it did come out smoothly because I'm quite a good actor, right? So I could veneer on. But here's the thing.
Fair enough.
Straight into the first group and I went, hey, and everything went slow-mo in this moment. And everything went slow-mo for a particular reason, I think, in that there were these young people. I suppose I was quite young myself, but they were younger than me. I would have probably been in my early 30s at the time. And the people there would have been in their late teens, early 20s, most of the people there. But like this lad, and he's there, another lad and a couple of girls there. He just turned around to me with a massive smile on his face, right? And just flowed into my handshake and shook my hand. And I was just like, does not compute. Because that response shouldn't have happened according to my worldview. Right?
Oh, I would have thought that would have egged you on.
Oh,
Okay.
it didn't stop me. I'm just saying everything went slow motion at that moment, right? Because I had this moment and I didn't let it disrupt me, but I had this moment when I was like, what?
You had a different expectation of what was going to happen.
So I expected that I would not be warmly greeted until I had explained myself, right? Because my presupposition was people don't welcome you until they know what you're about, right? People are, their position is not friendly. It's suspicious. That's the default position. You have to earn trust. You have to win, right? But this kid.
This is besides the point, but is that because, did you have that idea because that's how you were with people? Is that?
I had that idea because that's how I was raised, right? You know, there's certain elements that get handed out in a familial culture. And there are certain influential people in my family who tend to, I think, look at others in the world with an eye of suspicion, or look at the world around us with an eye of suspicion. You know, and that's all unconscious. You know, people, worldview, attitudes, these sorts of things, they get handed down like batons in a relay race, you know, from generation to generation half the time. And sometimes half of it we take on board unconsciously, and the other half we reject, you know, over explicitly. But we get shaped by our upbringing, our culture, all sorts of stuff like that. So to a certain degree, there were elements in, say, my familial culture of viewing others perhaps with suspicion, and I didn't have necessarily great role models for social interaction as I was growing up. And that's no judgment on anyone who was influencing me growing up. People are as they are, you know. But it really, it flipped my expectations in that moment. And it helped me to see something with clarity that I had been believing unconsciously, but now I could see it consciously. Right? I saw something of my own belief systems in that moment, which is good, because when you see something of your deep belief systems, then you get to change them. If you can't see them, if you're only ever operating through them, then they will run the game for you. So I knew at that moment that some of my fundamental ideas about human beings, social interaction, all of that were actually wrong. And they certainly weren't serving me.
This is Conversations with Tripp and Crowe.